Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Intimate Conversations with me, Anna Sansom, and my very special guest today, Mary Louise Cochrane of Red Velvet Revelry. I am so excited to have an opportunity to talk with Mary Louise today, and I'm going to let her explain a little bit about who she is and what she does. But I just want to start off by saying that I believe, Mary Louise, you're doing something pretty unique at the moment and really important, and I want the world to know about it. I really do. And we may not reach the whole world with this little video, but I hope that we certainly manage to reach some other women who might be really fascinated by what you're doing and hopefully want to join in some way. So I hope that's piqued some people's interest. So without further ado, would you just like to say a little bit about who you are and then tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, my name is Mary Louise and I'm a storyteller. I've been a storyteller for about 16 years and I tell stories for a living. And sometimes I write them myself, sometimes I tell traditional stories. But at the moment, I'm doing a new project called Red Velvet Revelry. And that's a project for to collect women's happy stories about sexuality.
Yeah, and it was that word happy that really got my attention because I'm an erotic writer, so I'm used to writing seductive, sexy, stimulating, arousing stories. And when you said happy, I started to think, gosh, because I'm naturally quite a joyful person, but I began to think, do I ever manage to get that joyfulness and that happiness and that playfulness into my stories, like my fictional stories, let alone we can talk about real life stories in a moment. So what happened when you decided that you wanted to find women's happy stories about sexuality?
Well, there was a point in my life where it was a kind of midlife thing, really, when I was turning 50, and a lot of things had shifted. My relationship had broken down, and one of the things that I was doing was looking at some of my beliefs around everything, my work, my money, and one of the things I was looking at really fiercely was sexuality and what I believed about sexuality, what I'd learned. And I decided that I needed to explore it because some of the things that I had kind of learned or was working with, I started to question them. Because my relationship had broken down and because I realized that there was all kind of areas of my life that I wasn't actually really allowed to look at. I mean, my background was, I had a very happy childhood and a lovely family and everything. But just by virtue of being in a Catholic sort of community, the teachings around sexuality were, on one hand, positive about life and fertility and that kind of thing, which I love, but was definitely not a kind of holistic thing. So I was in a relationship for a long time where neither of us could really talk about sexuality. And so I had to just think, well, as an adult, what do I think for myself? And one of the things was that I really needed to hear women talking about sex. One of the things that I've done in the past is I've been a counsellor, and I've worked with a lot of people who've got very traumatic stories about sexuality. And just in everyday life, the women that I know, everybody has got a miserable, painful, difficult story about sex. But I needed to hear from the women that had an actual happy story about sex, a story that said, I love sex, or this was the best thing, the best experience I ever had, or I love being older now and not having to worry about getting pregnant, whatever it is. But I didn't know how to hear those stories. And I wasn't really in a kind of social group that the women talked about those things, which I suppose is the point, is that some women do have friends that they can talk about their sexuality with, and possibly at different life stages. But at that particular time, I needed to hear those stories. I couldn't find them anywhere. I couldn't find the tone that I was looking for. You know, I wanted to read about women's real experiences, that were authentic, that were, you know, it wasn't erotic. I was interested in erotic writing and exploring it, but it was the real stuff that I wanted to hear, and that was just. So I decided that I would have to find it for myself.
Excellent. And it's so fascinating, isn't it? Because you're quite right. It's like we have these aspirational images of sexuality, you know, this sort of like the Hollywood movie of, you know, their bodies come together and there's fists clenching and, you know, dragging on the the bed sheets, and, you know, the look of ecstasy and the simultaneous orgasms. And we see these very kind of, or we read about these very like over the top, like wondrous experiences of sexuality. And I don't know about you, but when I see those, I think, really? Like often, like, really? I mean, it looks, wow, yeah, really. But is that really what's going on for people? And like you say, there's this sense of like, what's authentic, what's actually like inspirational rather than aspirational, I think is a key thing for me, because aspirational always feels like it's out of reach. Like it's always there for somebody else or something else. Inspirational inspires me to find my version of my best sex, or a happy sexual encounter, or whatever else it might be.
Yeah. And I was really aware that, having been a professional storyteller for 16 years, I had never been in a storytelling situation where someone was telling a story that had sexual content. That was the particular scene that I was in. I know that there's other things going on, but it was a kind of traditional storytelling scene. And it just occurred to me that, you know, we process so much of our life by sharing our experiences with our friends or with other people. And that's how we learn. That's how we learn that, well, maybe that thing that I think is normal in my house is not as normal as I thought, or something, like, you know, with very basic things. So I looked at, well, why is it not allowable for adults in all adult company to have even a traditional story that has a sexual reference? That's amazing to me. So I started speaking to women and saying, you know, I'm really interested in hearing these stories. And I would have typically two kinds of responses. So either somebody would go, what a great idea, you're collecting women's happy stories about sex, I'll give you a story. And they would be all kind of enthusiastic and tell me a story there and then, or we would arrange to chat. And then there were other women who would just kind of slightly back off and say, well, you know, that's not really, you know, they would often not say anything, but it clearly wasn't for them. And that's absolutely fine. You know, the women that I'm trying to help by collecting stories and sharing them are the ones who want to hear the stories.
Yes.
So I put together a live show with my pal, the two of us. She's a comic and a singer. And I said to her, look, I'd like to do something where we can tell these stories live. Would you do it with me? Because I was just too frightened to do it on my own. Because to let you understand, you know, the fact that I was exploring all these issues around sexuality was because I had been so repressed. And it was quite edgy for me to come out and talk about sex at all. So I don't come to this as the person that's got it all sorted. I come to this as the person who, I'm exploring this. You know, I didn't know this. You know, how am I only learning about the size of the clitoris now? You know, how could I lose a menstrual sponge in my own body because I don't really know what the inside of my body is like? You know, how is that possible as an adult, intelligent woman? So anyway, we put together this show, and I write songs as well. So we've got a few songs, and what happened was that the atmosphere in the room was electric. You know, I had this live event with 25 places. It sold out on Facebook in a matter of days. people came with their pals, and we were quite open about, we're just trying this. We don't know what we're doing, but we want to share this with you. Will you sort of trust us and come with us? And the feedback that we got was really warm, and the thing that pleased me the most was that women were saying, you're saying things that we know that we've never heard anybody else saying out loud. And that moved me, because that's what I would like, that's what I want to hear, and that's what I want to be able to facilitate for other women.
Fantastic. And what's it like for you being the voice of other people's stories? Because obviously you're the one who's speaking it out loud, you're the one who's saying the words, and as you said, there's I think that takes a lot of courage, because we're not used to having these conversations out loud, let alone in front of an audience. So what was it like for you that night when you did the performance?
Yeah, well, it was edgy, because I had spoken to my mother about doing this project, and I said, look, Mum, I'm going to do this thing. And she said, oh, well, maybe you should change your name so that you're not using the family name. And I was like, no. But so she was a little bit concerned. But by the time I got to the show, she came to the show, and so did my sister. And that was, and she came away from it having learned things and having had a kind of whole new experience in her 80s. So at the beginning, I was concerned that either I might be judged for being too raunchy, or in fact not raunchy enough. So it was very difficult to know how to pitch it, what people were expecting. And that is part of what I'm learning, is how do I communicate what it is that I'm doing in the right tone, because it's evolving. It really is evolving. And at the beginning, I thought that the project might be writing erotic things, like a bedtime story. But actually it's evolved into something which is sometimes erotic and sometimes not erotic, but it's different women's experiences. And my other anxiety was that I am a very white, straight, heteronormative, non-disabled woman. I've got my own particular experience, but what I'm discovering, and I'm really pleased about this, is that there's something valuable in women hearing stories which recognizes their own experiences, and they go, oh yeah, I get that. And then there's something really lovely as well about women hearing other women's experiences which are quite different. Because I really do think that the kind of difficulties that we have in some aspects of relating to each other in society is when you don't know somebody and you make a judgment about them based on something which is not true, or not the whole truth. Or, the minute you hear somebody's story about their life, or, different aspects of their lives, even if it's something that's unusual to you, the fact that they're a human being who's relating to you means that you don't judge them in a way you might if you just heard about an incident in a vacuum. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it really goes to show, doesn't it? Like you say, you were worried about being too raunchy or not raunchy enough. And I think that's the thing about sex and sexuality, is that actually it spans such a huge spectrum of experiences, that what's raunchy for one person may be very tame for another person. And they might say, well, what's that got to do about sex? But actually it could have been a pivotal point in the story owner's sexual evolution or sexual awakening or something. And we just, so I love that sense that the stories which are similar to ours validate us, and the stories which are different to us expand us. So you're offering kind of like this beautiful,
and everybody's story is valuable, and so that includes me. Like my story is valuable, and there must be lots of women who, like me, kind of were in one long-term relationship for a very long time and didn't really explore their sexuality until the middle of their life. And the confidence that comes in the middle of life for many of us is one of the things that allows us to go, do I believe that? Am I keeping that? Am I going to try something a bit different? Mm-hmm. And it's so liberating, and it's such a kind of positive mindset to be going into the future with. This narrative of aging and atrophy and misery is, I'm not having it. We need to hear different stories. So I think the stories that I know that the stories that I tell myself about myself are really important for the quality of my life. And so I know that must be the case for other women. And I'm willing to take a bit of a risk in terms of being judged or getting it wrong in order to open the conversation up a bit wider.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And so where are you now? Because obviously you've had women spontaneously telling you their stories. You've had the ones going, oh, that's a bit edgy. And you've done your show, you've sung your songs. So where are you now with it all?
Well, I was doing it all a little bit ad hoc at the beginning. I was just trying it out. And then I got commissioned for a show in a big storytelling festival at the end of the year. And so I am systematically looking at themes. I'm collecting as many stories as I can. And I'm also recording conversations to have on a podcast, because some people do like to listen. Mm-hmm. Some people like to watch. Some people want to participate. So I'm hoping that if when the world opens up properly again, there can be live performances that people can come to and see each other and chat. But there might also be an archive. There'll be an archive of stories that people can read, or they can listen to the podcasts, and maybe some kind of online kind of get together where people could either listen or share their stories. But that's going to evolve depending on what's helpful.
Yeah, and I full disclaimer, so as part of this I really want to contribute a story to your project, and I think I fall into a third camp. So you said there were the women who said, I'll tell you a story now. There were the ones who were like, oh, no, not so sure that that's for me. So I really want to contribute a story, but I couldn't immediately think of one. And I sat with this for a while, and I was like, I must have happy stories from my sexuality, my sex. I know I've got happy stories. I know they're there somewhere. And so you gave some really useful prompts to kind of think about what some of those stories, like how to I think access those stories. That's how I interpreted it anyway. So rather than just thinking what's my funniest story, or because I love the way you entertain and the way you story tell. And so I was thinking, I have to come up with a really good story for you, that's like makes a really good performing story. Anyway, I pushed all that to the side, and I thought, no, come on, just have a think about like what would I say were some of the sweet moments from my sex life. Like what's some of the sweetness, what are some of those sweet, happy and moments, and as I began to think of that, it actually took me quite back, back to my late teens and early 20s, because I think I guess partly for me it's just that I'm not in the relationship I'm in now. I don't share those stories publicly, which is why I write fiction. But I wanted to contribute a true story, because like we said, it's authentic. And so I thought, well, if I go back 20 years, maybe there's something there. And two things came to mind. So, and I haven't shared these with you yet, but one of them is a story when I think I would have been about 17. I won't even try to tell the story just now, but I was about 17. I had a Saturday job. I worked in Superdrugs on a Saturday, and I would come home after work with my £10 or whatever I'd earned that day, and I'd have like a little gap in the day before tea before dinner. And I remember one time coming home and putting the TV on. And, you know, back when this was like late 80s, early 90s, we had our 4 channels. We just got channel 4. It was very exciting. And I suspect it was on channel 4. And there was a country music show on the TV. And I love music, so I must have stopped to watch it. And I remember this person coming on, this performer coming on. And I remember I actually went right up to the TV screen and I knelt in front of it because I was studying this person. And I was like, oh my gosh, who are you? Who are you? And the thing that got me was I kept thinking, I don't know if you're a boy or a girl, but I really like you. Like, I won't spoil the punchline because I need to share it. But that moment was one where, after kind of thinking, I didn't really have crushes that felt like proper crushes like my friends had. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe I'm just not that sexual. But it was just that I hadn't met the right person. And so I met this person through the wonders of the TV screen. I didn't meet them at all. But yeah, so that kind of shifted something for me. And I think the fact that I can remember it in such vivid detail suggests that for me was like a happy story. It was like a moment. It was like, oh, this is special. I'm going to write it. I'm going to write it up, or I might tell it to you and see what you do with it. We'll see. And then the other stories I was thinking of are all kind of to do with body confidence, actually, and how very little body confidence I had when I was younger, and how it was only through being with partners who did have good body confidence that I felt I had permission to relax and embrace my body and just enjoy it, because they were enjoying theirs, they were enjoying mine. I was the only one that wasn't enjoying my body. So it was kind of this shift, that seeing other people's happiness and body confidence and just gusto when it came to enjoying sexual encounters. So I'm not an oral storyteller. Give me a couple of days and I'll write it down. But I love the fact that you can take these stories and pull out these themes and these moments that the audience goes, oh, I get it, or I want it, or whatever the response might be.
Yeah, and somebody said to me, are there any women who have happy stories about sex? And and that's why I'm doing the project, because there are women who have no happy stories about sex, or they can't access them because of other things. And I am absolutely not putting any pressure on anybody to have a great sex life, but it's to be allowed to even think about it. And one of the lovely things that I've learned about doing this project is that when I ask women to think about these happy, and they're not always funny or happy. Sometimes they are moving or beautiful or life-changing. So it's something in that kind of field. It doesn't have to be just, something good that happened. But by revisiting those memories, they feel the joy of that. And if they're still with the same partner, then it kind of reinforces their relationship. And there's a kind of byproduct of feeling good from it. And that's really lovely. And I am delighted that by doing it, it can have that positive effect. And I think even for the women who can't easily access any happy stories, the fact that the conversation is happening is getting them to think about something instead of it being something that they've shoved in a box and they have no expectations of, really. I have so many conversations with women who wouldn't tell me their stories about sex, but they will share with me important things from their lives, which is a very privileged space to be in. And makes me think, well, that part of the project is also valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I guess part of it as well is even like you say, it's even if somebody hasn't had their own experience, their own personal experience, knowing that it's a possibility, knowing that, like you say, women do and can have happy experiences of their sexuality.
Yeah.
It's hope providing as well, isn't it? But not empty hope, because you've got these stories from women who...
Yeah. And I'm looking for the hope as well. Look, I'm really enthusiastically looking for the stories that say, I'm a postmenopausal woman who has a great sex life, and that's a live part of my life. Mm-hmm. Now, I have now met 4 women who've told me stories about that. And I wouldn't have ever heard those stories in the media or in the world that I live in. So already it's giving me a kind of a potential sort of direction of travel that I want to know exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm more likely to experience it if I know it exists.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Oh, so excited. So if somebody is listening or watching to this and they're thinking to themselves, I've got a story. My story is that as valuable as anyone else's. As you said, all stories are valuable. And they're interested in contributing a story or sharing a story with you. How can they do that?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is to visit the Red Velvet Revelry website to get a sort of flavour of the tone and what we're about. And I'm very open to, if someone wanted to have a chat with me about it and say, I think I've got a story, they could email me at, so the website is www.redvelvetrevelry.com. And there's a link there to my email. So please get in touch with me, and I can send you an outline of the kind of things that we're doing, questions, and what I'll do with it, because it's really important that people are giving informed consent. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm collecting these stories to share anonymously. Unless somebody that's already a writer who wants their name to be on it because they want people to hear their story and know it's them. But the idea is that they will be held in written form, and I will retell the stories either in a podcast or a live show, but always anonymously. And if somebody gave me a story and then they changed their mind, then it's absolutely fine to say, actually, do you know what? Something shifted for me. I don't feel happy about it anymore. I absolutely understand that. I had somebody who sent me a story and they changed their mind just recently. And they said, I don't even know why, but part of the honouring of the story is to say, you know, if you feel comfortable giving it, that's great. If something doesn't feel right, then it's your story, it's your personal experience. I absolutely think you should keep it private.
Thank you. And I think you said it at the beginning, but people don't have to be writers to contribute a story. They don't have to be performers. They don't have to be like somebody who's the life and soul at the party who entertains everyone with their regaling of an experience.
It's just if you've had an experience that you think it might be useful for other women to hear, that's the driver, really. And that is my skill, is that if somebody, and this is with permission as well, but you know, somebody can tell me something and I can see the story in an anecdote or a piece of writing and draw that out. So it's the experience that I'm interested in, and so it's absolutely not about being a performer or a writer. Yeah.
And they could just have a chat with you and tell you the story. They don't have to do any writing at all if that's not the way that they like to express themselves.
And I've been having chats with people on Zoom as a way of just connecting and sharing the stories.
Fantastic. And I will just say, because this is going to go out on social media, so we're recording this early September 2021. What's the kind of the timeline for the project? So if this is going in a time capsule and somebody picks it up in 10 years' time.
Well, there'll be a new show coming out at the end of October, a live show, and that's going to be filmed. So I'm really hoping that there'll be bits of film of stories available that can be accessed through the website. And next year, well, it partly depends on what happens in the world. But I hope that there will be a combination of some live shows that are available to for people to come to, and there'll be some online things, possibly events that can be attended online.
Fantastic. And I guess so that the first port of call then is your website, but people can also find you on social media if they want to connect that way.
So there's a Red Velvet Revelry Facebook page, and also Instagram, and that's I'm not on Twitter.
No.
And I'm not going on Twitter.
So Facebook and Instagram, and I can pop all the links with this video as well, so people can easily find you and make that connection if they feel drawn to. And of course, even if someone doesn't want to contribute their story, they can be part of your virtual audience, and they can still be part of the project by listening and watching and witnessing other women's stories.
Exactly. So some people who might not feel comfortable to come to a live show about women and sex can visit the website and read a story or hear a podcast without involving anybody else, or if they felt uncomfortable at just trying that. So that's there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to share today or say that we've not covered?
I think that when I read Desire Lines by Anna Sansom, that was part of the book. So that's been something that has definitely it was exactly that experience of, here are things that are like my experience, and here are things that are not my experience, and that's really it really helped to kind of confirm that what I was doing had something in it. So yes.
Thank you. No, thank you for mentioning that. And I think a huge part of this is, nobody needs to give us permission, but often we feel like we need permission, don't we, to kind of to go there, to say the words, to revisit our stories, to create our new stories, to even imagine what stories are possible for us. And so I think a big part of all of this work is saying, give yourself the permission to do this. And here are some other women who have done that and are doing it. And it's not about comparing yourself to anyone else, but it's about saying, what's my story? And what do I want my story to be? Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I always love speaking with you, and I will hugely encourage people to visit your website to have a listen to some of your storytelling that's on the website, including the time you went to buy your first vibrator in Anne Summers, which is a very good story. That was a good one. So yeah, people can go and they can have a listen and hopefully want to contribute in some way and stay in touch with the project.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. Thank you for helping to share the good word.
Absolutely. Thanks then. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.